The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and despair, and in one silent room, a tiny life was slipping away while the most feared man in the city stood powerless. Doctors had already turned their eyes down, machines whispered their final warnings, and the word dead hovered unspoken in the air. For the first time in his ruthless life, the Mafia boss who controlled streets, money, and men could not control fate. What happened next would shatter every belief about power, poverty, and miracles. And before this story goes any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that even the smallest light can break the deepest darkness, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this only live when hearts stay open. The Mafia boss had built his empire on fear. His name alone could close shops and empty streets, yet none of that followed him into the neonatal intensive care unit. There, he was just a father standing helplessly behind glass, watching a newborn no bigger than his forearm fight a losing battle. The baby had arrived too early, fragile and struggling, born into a world already stacked against him by fate. The doctors had worked through the night, their hands steady, their faces calm, but their eyes told the truth. The child's lungs were too weak, his heart too tired, and his body too small to endure. By dawn, medical certainty replaced hope. They told the family there was nothing more to be done, machines would soon be turned off, the miracle everyone prayed for was not coming. Outside the hospital, life went on as usual. Taxis honked, vendors shouted, and people hurried past without knowing that in one quiet room, destiny was preparing to bend. Among those people was a poor girl named Elena, barely 19, thin from hunger, and dressed in clothes that had seen too many winters. She cleaned hospital floors for a living, working long shifts for wages that barely kept her younger siblings fed. Her father had died years ago, her mother bedridden, and every day felt like a test of endurance. Yet despite everything, Elena carried a strange calm within her, born from loss and responsibility far beyond her age. Elena had been assigned to clean the neonatal wing that morning. As she moved her mop slowly across the polished floor, she felt the heaviness in the air. She had seen sorrow before, but this was different. Through the glass, she noticed the baby surrounded by machines, wires tangled like a cruel web around such a tiny body. She saw the man standing there, tall, intimidating, dressed in expensive clothes, his face rigid yet broken. She did not know who he was, only that grief had reduced him to something painfully human. Something stirred in her chest, a memory she had buried deep. Years ago, her own baby brother had been born premature in a village clinic with no proper equipment. Doctors had given up then too. Her mother had refused to let go, holding that fragile life against her chest for hours, breathing warmth and faith into him until the sun rose again. The boy survived against all odds, though he would later die in an accident years later. That memory, both miracle and tragedy, lived inside Elena like a scar that still burned. As Elena finished her work, she noticed the doctors preparing to leave the room. The machines were still on, but their expressions carried finality. She felt an urge she could not explain, a pull stronger than fear. She knew her place. She knew she was nobody, but she also knew what it meant to refuse surrender. Her heart raced as she stepped closer to the glass. She did not speak. She simply watched, her eyes filling with tears for a child she had never met. In that moment, the Mafia boss noticed her. Among the doctors and nurses who avoided his gaze, this poor girl stood still, her face soft with empathy rather than fear. Something about her presence unsettled him. He had seen loyalty bought with money and obedience forced with violence, but he had rarely seen compassion offered freely. Their eyes met briefly, and Elena felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility, as if fate itself was pressing her forward. She made a decision that would change everything. Elena knew the rules. She knew she was not allowed to interfere, but she also knew that the baby had minutes, not hours. Gathering courage she did not know she possessed, she quietly approached a nurse and pleaded to be allowed just a moment. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. The nurse hesitated, torn between protocol and the raw sincerity in front of her. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was something greater, but the nurse stepped aside. Elena washed her hands carefully, her fingers shaking. She stepped into the room where life and death balanced on a thin line. The baby lay motionless, chest rising faintly under the guidance of machines. Elena did not know medicine. She did not know science. What she knew was warmth, love, and the stubborn refusal to give up. She gently placed her hands near the baby, not touching the wires, not disturbing the machines, but offering something invisible yet powerful. She closed her eyes and focused every part of her being on that tiny life, remembering her mother's breath, her brother's fragile heartbeat, and the belief that life listens when called with sincerity. Time seemed to slow. The room was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors. For long moments, nothing changed. Doubt crept in, heavy and cruel. Who was she to challenge doctors? Who was she to believe in miracles? But then, almost imperceptibly, a change occurred. The monitor flickered. The heartbeat, once irregular, steadied just slightly. Oxygen levels shifted. A nurse noticed, then another. Doctors rushed back in, confusion written across their faces. What had been declared impossible moments earlier was now unfolding before their eyes. The baby's breathing began to stabilize, not fully, not perfectly, but enough to force the doctors to pause. Machines were adjusted. Tests were repeated. The room filled with controlled urgency rather than resignation. Elena stepped back, her legs weak, tears streaming down her face. She had not planned this. She had not expected anything. Yet something had happened, something undeniable. The Mafia boss watched in stunned silence. For the first time in his life, fear gave way to awe. He saw the doctors scrambling, hope cautiously returning, and the poor girl standing in the corner as if she had just awakened from a dream. He did not understand what she had done, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Fate had shifted the moment she walked into that room. Hours passed. The baby was not out of danger, but he was alive. Truly alive. Doctors spoke in careful tones about unexpected recovery and rare cases. Science searched for explanations, but none fully fit. The baby's condition continued to improve throughout the day, defying every prediction made at dawn. Elena returned to her cleaning duties, trying to disappear back into invisibility. She expected nothing, no reward, no recognition. For her, it was enough that the baby had a chance, but fate was not finished. That evening, Elena was called into an office. Her heart pounded with fear. She worried she would be fired, punished for crossing boundaries she was never meant to approach. Instead, she found herself standing before the Mafia boss himself. Up close, his presence was overwhelming, but his eyes were no longer cold. They were wet with gratitude and something close to humility. He learned her name. He learned her story. For the first time in years, he listened instead of commanding. He discovered the life she lived, the sacrifices she made, the quiet strength that had carried her through endless hardship, and something inside him cracked open. This man who had taken so much from the world realized how little he had truly given. The days that followed felt unreal. The baby continued to recover, slowly but steadily, becoming a symbol of resilience whispered about in hospital corridors. Elena returned to work each morning, but her life had begun to change in subtle ways. Her workload eased, her mother received better medical care, her siblings were offered opportunities she had never dreamed possible. None of it came with threats or fear. It came quietly, respectfully, like a debt being repaid not with money alone, but with intention. The Mafia boss underwent his own transformation. Watching his child fight for life stripped him of illusions about control and power. He began to withdraw from the darkness that had defined him, step by step. It was not redemption overnight, but it was a beginning. and at the center of it all was the memory of a poor girl who had dared to believe when everyone else gave up. Months later, the baby was finally strong enough to leave the hospital. Nurses cried. Doctors smiled in disbelief. Elena watched from a distance, her heart full. She did not need acknowledgement. She had witnessed something rare, something sacred. She had seen how courage did not always roar. Sometimes it whispered, stepped forward quietly, and changed the course of lives forever. As the Mafia boss carried his child out into the sunlight, he looked back one last time and saw Elena standing there, small against the vast world, yet powerful beyond measure. In that moment, he understood a truth that no empire had ever taught him. Real miracles do not come from wealth, fear, or force. They come from ordinary people choosing compassion when it would be easier to walk away. And now, before this story ends, if this journey touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that courage can live in the most unexpected places, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive. Also, I want to make a special request. Before the ending, leave a comment telling us what part of this story moved you the most, because your words matter more than you know. In a world that often celebrates power and wealth, remember Elena. Remember the baby who lived. Remember that even when doctors give up, even when fate seems sealed, a single act of courage can rewrite destiny. If this story left a mark on your heart, engage with this video now. Let kindness echo further than fear. Let hope travel farther than despair. Because sometimes the miracle is not what happens to us, but what we choose to do when everything seems lost.